According to a Forbes article, the Bill and Melinda Gates divorce is likely to be one of the largest personal assets division in history. So we took all the data and took all this research and information and we aggregated it together. And this video is about the 5 top things to know about the Bill and Melinda Gates divorce. Number 1, the Wall Street Journal came out with an article this month that Melinda Gates was meeting with divorce lawyers since 2019 in order to end the marriage with Bill Gates. So again, they did their independent reporting upon this. There's an article out there about that. The part that I find interesting, and again, I'm a Florida divorce lawyer, not a Seattle, Washington divorce lawyer, so this isn't a primer about divorce law in Washington. Melinda's been looking at this since 2019. So whatever her reasoning was, obviously it seems like it started somewhere in 2019. Now, from our understanding, the people that she was talking to in the law firm she was talking to, there's also some articles out there that they also worked on the Bezos divorce as well. So I gotta imagine, I mean, I've had some big cases, but to have Jeff Bezos's divorce, right? And to have Bill Gates' divorce at the same time in their firms, I think they're different sides and different parties. It's just, that to me blows my mind. So again, this first part that we're going into is the fact that it's been since 2019, according to these reports. Part of these reports is around the time that Bill Gates' ties to Jeffrey Epstein became public. That's when Melinda Gates began to start the talks. And obviously, Melinda Gates has done, a pretty astonishingly amazing job in philanthropy and all the other different types of community involvement she's done during her life. And as we've seen before, any ties to Jeffrey Epstein, become become a little bit of a problem. So who knows if that's the reasoning why. Again, I'm not saying that I know that's the reason why. I'm just saying the Wall Street Journal is saying that they have the information about it. So that's an interesting perspective that starts to drive people to say, is that the reasoning behind it? But the reality is, it seems like it's been going on for a while. So that's going to get us into number 2. So number 2, now we're going to get into the law a little bit here. Now, Washington is a no-fault divorce state, right? So you don't need to prove fault. You just basically, that either party can file, state that the marriage is irretrievably broken. That's the law in state Florida. So different terminology in Washington, obviously, but no fault states, there's some of them out there, not all of them are no fault states, but it looks like Washington is one of them. So a lot of times, some other kind of bad behavior and things like adultery and other things don't matter as much in a no fault state. So that's an interesting aspect of it. Washington's not necessarily always a 50-50 split state. But they do have their laws. And again, I'm a Florida divorce lawyer, so I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but just looking from the dynamic of, all right, let's look at how are they going to figure this out? Because number 2 of this really is, how is this all going to happen, right? You got the number 4, Forbes number 4, richest person in the world, right? With Bill Gates. It's pretty intense. Now, they need to figure a way to divide this. How do they divide this property? And it appears that each of them have retained counsel. Again, we talked about that it was also through, same firms that were doing Jeff Bezos's divorce. So so I'm guessing they got some experience. So the divorce lawyers that are dealing with this, they have some experience in some pretty high asset, high income litigation. So I think they understand what they have to do. So going back to number 1, that if this was in the works since 2019, sometimes people think, that's crazy. Why is it taking so long? Well, just when you're dealing with litigation this complicated, just the philanthropic organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it's massive, right? And then just with everything else, it's very complicated. You have to go through each of these different subjects. And even in a really super amicable divorce, it still takes a lot of time. So I would imagine these law firms are burning the midnight oil, working around the clock on these issues because there's just so many of them. There's just a ton. So to the law firms that are dealing with this, I mean, kudos to them for dealing with the fact that this is a super complicated situation, and they've been able to keep this out of the public eye for this long, because that's, you know, probably a part of what their goal is. And the, you know, client usually in a situation like this, they want to be able to release their own statement, like what happened on Twitter. Bill and Melinda, you know, they released the joint statement on Twitter about their divorce, that the pending divorce, and it shocked a lot of people in May 2021, right? And everybody just was blown away. In a case like this, you want to do as much as you possibly can behind the scenes as possible. You don't want everybody talking about it. You don't want it all over the media. You don't want people like me, you know, talking about it. You know, you want to just get everything as ironed out as possible, so that way you're able to just deliver it to the judge and say, here you go. Here's what we want. Here's how we're going to divide our property. Here's how Xanadu 2.0 is going to be divided. And Xanadu is going to bring us into number 3. Okay, number 3. Xanadu 2.0, that's the couple's main home in Medina, Washington, right? This is a $131 million estate, nicknamed Xanadu 2.0, 66,000 square feet and 7 years to build. So, whoa, you know, just from that alone, a lot of times people would say, well, that's going to be complicated. You know, but they have other properties as well. So they have multiple other houses, other properties, and that just starts to scratch the surface. So they also have private planes, I think 4 of them, at least the Forbes articles seeming to suggest that, you know, a vast art collection. It looks like Bill Gates purchased the Codex Leicester. It's a notebook filled with the scientific writings by Leonardo da Vinci, and he bought that for, I think, around $30 million back in 1994. Because, I mean, that is super cool. You know, so again, when you're splitting this type of property, you're not going to take the Codex Leicester and just you're not going to divide it in half and you know, okay, here you go. Here's half for you, Melinda. Here's half for you. But no, obviously, one person's going to get the Codex, and the other person's going to get, you know, the Picasso, and then the other person's going to get Xanadu 2.0, and the other person's going to get one of the other 3 or 4 properties or more properties that they have. So that's kind of the way that divorces work. So part of this is it's an amazingly large estate, right? Just ginormous and massive, and you know, any law firm that's taking it on is probably going, well, there goes our next few years, because it's just, you know, probably every day it's working on just how to divide these different things into, you know, you got to do legal descriptions of properties, you got to do different deeds on things, and changing over titles and agreeing on different valuations, and it's a lot. Once you start to amass different things, children, assets, Xanadu 2.0, you know, you have lawyers help you out. So that's part of it. Just this unbelievable, at least from my perspective, when I first saw this and heard about it, and just thinking about the time, the effort, the obviously the expense. You know, this isn't going to be cheap to divide this. And if they've been working on it for 2 years, obviously, but I'm sure every penny is well deserved. But it's so complicated. You know, they hold a stake in the Four Seasons Hotel, right? You know, and then there's this, you know, little thing called Microsoft, right? So there's Microsoft, there's their philanthropic organization and foundation. I mean, it just keeps going. So that's going to bring us to number 4. So we're number 4, top things to know about Bill and Melinda Gates divorce. And if you're getting any value from this, you find this to be, you know, somewhat interesting, something derived from it, you know, you can like it, you can comment, you can Again, I can't give legal advice, and again, I don't practice in Washington anyway, so this is clearly not legal advice. It's just legal commentary about one of the largest divorces in history. This is a divorce channel, Foley Divorce. Subscribe if you're interested in information about divorce. So one of the things that we saw when this was filed and when this became kind of public knowledge was there's no prenup. So that's number 4, no prenup. Sometimes in these, very, very large estates and very, very complicated cases, there's a prenup a lot of times, and you just kind of tick down the prenup and you're able to figure it out. And then if there's things that still need to be resolved, then boom, okay, you try to resolve those, see if you can. If you can't, you go to court. And there's some celebrities now that are, in court over prenups. But for the most part, it is a little surprising, that there was no prenup. But, they've been together for a while and it worked out for them. And there was no, at least from our understanding or anything that we've read, no postnuptial agreement, but it looks like they've already started dividing it. So as of, the filming of this, they've started to move things around, started to divide different properties and transfer different holdings and assets and things like that. So that usually is an indication that the settlement's going good and things are going in the right direction. If you're starting to move things, you're starting to transfer things and titling things in the right direction, that means that they're starting to reach consensus on certain things. And that could have been when they went public. That could have been, hey, we've reached an, who knows. The fact that there's no prenup is interesting, and it's kind of opened up the door on a lot of these other issues, because prenups can kind of keep it a little bit more between the two of them. Now it has to be a little bit more public record and more out there. And then if there's any disputes over anything, the barn doors are just blown off from the. Now, speaking of barn doors, farmland. This one blew my mind in this case. And this is a New York Post article. Something like 240,000 acres of farmland. They're one of the largest private landowners in the United States, and that's a lot of farmland. My staff is like, why do you care about the farmland so much? Who cares about the farmland? But I don't know, single largest owner of farmland. That's and dealing with some farms in other divorce cases in the past, like when you have a legal description of a farm, it's usually just different than like a house. Like a house is like a legal description of a plat. You have this, you go this, and it's like a nice little rectangle. For farms, it can go on for pages, like walk 16 paces west and then turn 30 degrees and, over this little hump, and then you go to this and 90 degrees over. It's just, some of these legal descriptions just go for pages. Again, I'm sure there's, an entire firm that's probably just dealing with the farmland part of it. Do I know that for certain? No, but again, legal commentary, I would think so, because that is a massive amount of farmland, massive amount of property to try to figure out what to do with, how to divide it, and where it's going to go. It seems like with their foundation, at least from the reports and all the stories that we've been reading and things online, that it seems like they're going to continue to work together within their foundation. And this farmland was purchased to, at least it looks like from the articles, that to further their nonprofit, to kind of further their research and things within their nonprofit and Gates Ag 1. So as far as how they're going to divide that, I guess we'll see. I think there's enough farmland. I think I talked enough about farmlands. So Business Insider just had a report about a week ago that Bill Gates transferred $850 million worth of shares last week to Melinda Gates, according to the SEC. So, okay. So he transferred 2.25 million shares of equipment manufacturer Deere to French Gates through his investment firm, Cascade Investments. Now, Cascade Investments, that's a pretty large investment, and kind of an arm of some of the different things that they own. I live in Tampa, Florida, and Cascade invested into the large it's called Water Street. So again, if you're not from Tampa, you may not be as familiar with it, but Water Street is massive. It's a huge part of the Tampa burgeoning skyline. So, I've definitely seen with some of the things that are coming up in downtown Tampa and kind of building on. It's kind of a joint venture there, and Jeff Vinnick, who owns the Tampa Bay Lightning, and just really all this interesting stuff that's going on in downtown Tampa. But Cascade Investment was, I remember that years back when they had made this investment, and we had heard that, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. So Cascade Investment, it looks like they're moving different things around and transferring ownership of different things. So that again is the final part of this, is how does this all work? So how are they going to do this? And it's happening. First, you gotta figure, okay, what do we have? And there's certain couples, I'm sure, that you just got to figure out what you have. And everybody, if they're getting a divorce, they're like, oh, what do we have in the attic? We have Halloween decorations. We have this, in the Gates' attic, they have 260,000 acres of farmland, evidently, but you got to find a way to divvy it up in a way that's fair, that's equitable, that makes sense. So now you have to go through this process of moving things around. So obviously we'll see through, SEC filings and things of that nature, different things that will move back and forth in titling. And I'm sure there'll be continued articles and things written about this as days go on, because the fact that they filed at the beginning of May doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be done with in June. That's not the, it could be maybe, maybe they have an uncontested final hearing date. I don't know. But this was the public aspect of it, obviously a joint Twitter statement. And they knew there would be a lot of media interest in the case, clearly. And now they go through the process of division of the different assets, and if there is any liabilities or debt, obviously if, fourth richest person in the world, probably not a whole lot of debt, but obviously debt on certain different assets depending on how they've structured deals and all this other stuff. But for the most part, division of assets. And that's why it's one of the largest personal asset divisions in history. So it's from my perspective as a Florida divorce lawyer, it interests me of just how this is going to happen and how they're doing it. And you can see it happening in real time with each of these different articles and each of these reports that comes out, because it shows what their mindset is, if they're trying to be amicable, if there's issues that they're having. And sometimes you'll see things that become an issue, and you can look at other celebrity divorces to see the issues that come up and to see the problems that occur. And they are celebrities. They are obviously in the public eye, and they're extraordinarily high profile. So this is something that will probably continue on until obviously it's done, be something that's in the public eye of people having an interest in how it's being divided and how things are going to go moving forward. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe below. This has been the 5 things about the Bill Gates divorce. We appreciate it. Have a good one.